Hi, everyone. This is Preston Clark with EverFi. I'm the president of our higher ed division, and I'm a guest speaker, a surprise last-minute speaker on today's webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm also going to do a repeat of Michele's sound check, if I may, just since I'm in a different location from him. So right before, just really quickly, if a couple of you could indicate that the sound is okay in the question or chat box, I'd appreciate it, and then we will get started. All right, thank you, Annie. Okay, I think we are good to go. So, again, my name is Preston Clark. Really appreciate you spending the next 30 to 45 minutes with us. We're going to move through about 25 slides pretty quickly. I have with me Jennifer Davidson, Senior Vice President of Strategic Accounts here at EverFi, and Lisa Hobenstock, Vice President of Customer Success. Jennifer, I think, is calling in from Kentucky today, and Lisa is calling in from Boston. And Michele, who's keeping us all organized, is calling in from San Francisco, and I am in Florida. So we hope that the audio and the technical all come together to work out today, as we suspect it will. We will be recording the webinar, so if you have to jump off, or there's any issues, or if you'd like to show this or share this with your peers, other folks in the institution, sometime tomorrow you'll have a recording in your inbox. Because we're in different locations, you'll have to excuse as I am connecting with Jennifer Davidson. I'm going to ask her for my opening remarks, that she move the slides. She is driving the webinar and the deck here today. So Jennifer, let's go ahead and move forward and jump in. So this week was one of the biggest weeks EverFi has ever had in its history. We held our first annual Campus Prevention Network annual summit in Boston on Monday and Tuesday. And certainly that's not what this webinar is about, nor is it a plug for next year. It's significant because we had over 530 individuals, campus leaders representing over 375 colleges and universities with us in Boston, learning from the likes of Peter Lake and Holly Ryder-Milkovich and Rob Bulow and others on our team and in our network. And it was just an unbelievable event. But for me, Jennifer and Lisa, we're drinking from a fire hose literally right now, because we've had more conversations on strategic planning for rolling out prevention and compliance programs for student populations than we've ever had before, which is saying something, because this is what we do for a living. This is what we do every day. And so I did want to plug that, our hope and our goal is that, you'll have some very actionable next steps coming out of this webinar today. And a part of that is sharing resources with you. And so I guess, to the extent that this is an offer of resources, and if you find today to be just the beginning and you need more, which I suspect in 30 minutes we won't get to everything, or even the beginning, I would encourage you to go to a website called campuspreventionnetwork.com. It's powered by our prevention and compliance team, and there is an absolutely incredible wealth of resources there. It's free. It's open to anyone, and you'll see a lot of case studies and resources, and a lot of the sessions from the summit were recorded and will be posted there as video files as well. So there's no catch on this. Would absolutely encourage you to go over there and download any resources that may be of use to you. We're also recently launching, just launched yesterday or day before yesterday, our Facebook page, Campus Prevention Network. Similar, this isn't us driving a conversation. You'll see already it's campus leaders, it's your peers who are sharing resources and links and articles, and would just, it's another resource that we'd be remiss not to bring up. No catch on that, just absolutely a great community that's being built there, and certainly want to give you an opportunity to jump into it. Jennifer, we can jump to the next slide. Thank you. So one of the many things that happened at the event was a lot of conversations with a lot of campus leaders who, like yourselves, are thinking about 2017 and beyond, as it relates to sexual violence and substance abuse and other educational programs, both to meet Clery and Title IX, but certainly way beyond that from a prevention best practices perspective. And so the purpose of today's webinar is to go through some of what we're hearing and some of what we're seeing, to introduce you to additional resources that can be useful to you, and then to have Jennifer and Lisa also talk about how we specifically work with campuses to help them with programs for campuses ranging from small community colleges to some of the largest state schools in the country. We're now working with 1,700 campuses in total, so this is very much what we live and breathe every day. And so with that, let's jump into the next slide, and I'll sort of back up and give a very high level sort of overview of what it is that we do and how we think about holistic prevention and compliance programs in higher education. So EverFi launched something called the Campus Prevention Network late last year that really is now starting to take shape in a very meaningful and material way. And the idea is to create a community, an open community, open access community for everyone from deans of students to health and wellness and prevention experts to provosts to VPs of HR. What we found was that as the mandates grew and as climate surveys revealed to us more and more as a nation and as leaders on our campuses that we're sitting on a very, very serious and important problem, that we wanted to create a network effect whereby we could share best practices and learn from each other. We're all coming from this from a different perspective. For Lisa and Jennifer, they've been in higher ed for a long time. I used to be assistant general counsel at the University of Miami, where I dealt with compliance, which is just one of the many elements that go into this. But the purpose and the mission of CPN was to really foster this feedback loop, which you see that relates to assessing and education and helping institutions that are both understaffed and not understaffed, because this is hard for anyone, to think through a more scalable way, a more efficient way, and ultimately a more effective way to administer population level prevention programs in the vastly diverse and unique campuses that we all represent. Jennifer, let's jump to the next slide. A part of understanding that complexity is understanding that that whether it's the right way to think about this or not, the compliance umbrella has served to both propel and perhaps fragment the way campuses think about in higher ed. Like many global organizations, it becomes a very decentralized body for lots of really good reasons. But when you roll in compliance and other training initiatives, what you'll find is that there's a lot of different ownership over various topics. And we like to look at this holistically. So while we very much consider ourselves to be a mission-based organization that is committed to prevention education, we also understand that not every institution sees this through the same lens. Not every institution is structured the same way from an org chart perspective and from an ownership perspective, and that you have different talents and different skill sets, and that there's, quite frankly, there's politics inside of that. And so part of our job is to help and work with campuses think through how to navigate that. And that's some of what we'll be talking about today, but certainly obviously just putting it out there that as you think about 2017 and beyond and to the mission of this webinar today, how you improve your programs, we know that somewhere on your list is the complexity and navigating the complexity of rolling out a program at the campus-wide level that may have a lot of different, very passionate, very intelligent, very thoughtful stakeholders that nevertheless make the final approval, the deployment, the maintenance, the upkeep, what do you do with the data, how do you circle it back from an assessment perspective, how does that improve future training initiatives, that all of that becomes very heavy and very complex within the complexity that is higher ed, which we appreciate. As someone who used to work in higher ed, it's built that way for a lot of good reasons, but certainly when you think about centralized educational programs, it's not easy to do. Jennifer, let's jump to the next slide. Thanks. So the way we tend to think about, we've spent the better part of the last 6 months on airplanes. And that's, we have a team of over 100 folks who are dedicated to our higher ed segment of the EverFi educational platform. And what we find is that there's a crawl, walk, run vantage point or viewpoint on how we're working with campuses and how they're ultimately approaching some of what I expressed on the previous slide, which was how do we go about doing this in a meaningful way that's prevention minded first, but that meets the compliance requirements so that we're both getting up to speed and doing what we need to do, but also being very thoughtful about who and when and how we're training and what the assessment process looks like, so that we have a meaningful feedback loop that can help influence future training initiatives. And so all that said is we tend to start with campuses, helping them think through the crawl stage, where we see there's the initiative and there's the desire to deploy primary training for in this case, we're talking today about new students, but certainly we work with a lot of VPs of HR and provosts and Title IX coordinators who are centered around employee training, that we're aligning and discussing what the completion goals are and how those are reached, because certainly we understand that it's not easy to come into this and set a goal of 95% or 100% completion without a really thoughtful communication strategy and follow-up plan so that you can achieve that. And then when we think about walk and run, and this, Lisa will talk a little bit, Jennifer and Lisa will talk a little bit about this today, is as you begin to deploy these programs, as you begin to think about what not just a primary prevention program looks like, but an ongoing, whether it's in person or online or workshops or whatever format it might take, it's how are you centralizing that data? How are you analyzing that? How are you keeping some consistent data points that can be benchmarked against year over year? And we tend to see that as very much the walk stage. And we find that most higher ed institutions are entering into the walk stage now because they've historically done something either population level or targeted around sexual assault prevention and alcohol and other drugs. And then the run stage is the one where it's very much, it becomes a conversation we find ourselves having with CTOs and provosts and Title IX coordinators who are thinking about what technologies are already there on campus to help ensure that the different student populations are receiving the type of educational programs that both resonate and are trackable, so that from a longitudinal perspective, we can think through, as just one example, what it means for an incoming freshman who's going to be educated around sexual violence prevention, and what it means when, let's say, your campus experience is such that you see 70% of your juniors leave campus for the first time to be on outside facilities, and how that changes the landscape for them, how that changes their relationship to alcohol, how that changes their relationship to their peers and their students. And so very much thinking about what it would be to build a very comprehensive program that really does require a lot of sophistication from quite frankly, a business operations perspective, from a project management perspective. And we know that those conversations tend to occur later in the stage of development, but we also know many campuses, both small and large, are now at the point where they want to have better data and they want to have better, they want to be able to show the board and the provost and the chancellor and the attorney general and whoever it might be a really sophisticated and comprehensive report on how the campus is systematically and centrally approaching these important topics. And that's certainly a trend that we're seeing now, and that's reflective of the conversations we had over the last few days at our summit in Boston. Jennifer, let's move on to the next slide. Thanks.
Sure.
And with that,
excuse me.
By way of introduction, so for the next 25, 30 minutes or so, what we'll do is we're going to have Jennifer Davidson, our SVP of Strategic Accounts, walk through some of the landscape and some of how campuses, some of the best practices we're seeing across campuses, how they're thinking about both primary and ongoing education. And then we'll also hear from Lisa, who's quite frankly on the ground the most, because she manages a team of over 30 individuals in Boston who are engaging with deans of students and health and wellness folks every single day. And she brings a very enlightened data perspective and assessment perspective that I think you can take value from as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jen. Excellent. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Preston, for opening us up this afternoon. As Preston shared, my name is Jennifer Davidson, and I'm a Senior Vice President here at EverFi, and been working with institutions over the past 6 years, helping them think through their strategy from 3.5 years ago, where institutions were quickly scrambling to identify a product to support the newly held accountability for providing primary education to their student population. Through the past 3 or 4 years, where Preston said the course and the content of our conversations have shifted significantly. But I think it's well worth sort of, going back and looking at how we landed and where we are now. And this slide does a really nice job of representing what the Clery Act requires training to be, which is ultimately what we see also in line with Title IX, and that the training that we see and are being asked by legislation, both federal and state, that it be comprehensive and intentional and integrated into the learning experience, and that ultimately should be informed by research and assessed for outcome, which is a pretty significant lift for institutions in really thinking about what they're charged with and how they actually move to deploy that. And the other pieces of this, which we all recognize, is that they have to be sustained over a period of time, and that these programs must be visible and developmentally appropriate, recognizing that a course that's designed for a community college student should differ from a content and perspective than a course for an incoming first-year student in a traditional institution. And then when we think about how these requirements from a compliance perspective align with best practice, none of us should really be surprised, as the legislation was ultimately informed by leaders in the field, including Holly Ryder-Milkovich, formerly of the University of Michigan, who now leads our efforts around sexual assault prevention at EverFi. And as a member of that negotiated rulemaking committee, they really were thoughtful in terms of how we could ultimately effectuate change on our campuses regarding and supporting the policy mandate, but also ultimately the education perspective as well. And they recognized that these issues were systemic and that they actually require system-wide solutions. And brief single dosage programs do lack sustained impact. So yes, it's great to be able to provide primary prevention education to your incoming population, but what are you doing as an institution to continue to present an opportunity to learn around these critical issues? And ultimately, we recognize that older students model behavior for new students. And our data currently right now is reflecting, as students have been introduced to this content, that they're actually asking for more. They're not asking for less. They are actually asking institutions to continue to provide them with this critical education experience. And ultimately, from an institutional perspective, highly visible ongoing training does demonstrate institutional commitment. So it is a nice way for institutions to be able to reflect their commitment to improving their campus safety. And as we think about how institutions are now thinking about technology and how technology can support their education efforts and otherwise, 3 years ago, they were primarily focused in on that first-year student population. And now, as we've grown as an organization, as institutions have grown around their sophistication around understanding these issues, they're really relying upon online education to support their supplemental efforts on campus, and ultimately to collect that data that Preston mentioned that's so critical from an actionable perspective to be able to collect and implement. That notwithstanding, the White House Task Force has also issued an edict recently in January, and as Peter Lake said so thoughtfully this week in Boston, it's a shame this report came out 2 weeks after the beginning of January, because it may have sort of gotten lost in the shuffle of what was happening from a larger perspective in the United States. But ultimately, this is a phenomenal guidebook for college presidents, chancellors, and senior administrators to really think about how they create a campus-wide sexual assault prevention effort. And if any of you have seen it, or if you've yet to see it,
you'll note that the second strategy is highlighting the need to provide prevention education, both primary and annual ongoing, from freshman through graduate school, and noting that it's critical to impart these skills to these students and sends ultimately a strong message around campus values. So the first step for EverFi in being able to proceed or progress along the crawl, walk, run scenario that Preston spoke about earlier is really to be able to identify the application of the courses that we have. And to that end, we have increased the courses that we are offering now across our platforms. Today, as Preston mentioned, we're specifically talking about students. And so that you'll see here that from a sexual assault prevention perspective, we have courses now that delineate their content in there and the information that's going to be specific to address the needs of the particular students, recognizing that as a first-year, first-time freshman, you're going to need some different type of information than you would as a graduate student. And you'll note there that we have and recognize the changing demographic of not only institutions, but ultimately the changing demographic of the institutions we're supporting. So we have courses that are designed to address the needs of adult learners at community colleges. We continue to have the leading alcohol prevention course in the market and have moved on to ultimately expand that too, as you see under the ongoing courses. And then just in just a few short weeks, I think less than a week, we're actually going to be launching a brand new prescription drug prevention course that we had a remarkable amount of interest at our Campus Prevention Summit, recognizing the increasing concern around the misuse of prescription and opioid drug use. And then what's new, if you will, to our course bundle is this concept of ongoing courses, as you'll see here. And we are now presenting institutions with an opportunity to provide an iterative experience, a curricularized event, if you will, to address sexual assault prevention. And that course is about a 20-minute experience, reiterate some of the core concepts that were learned in the primary prevention course, allows institutions to demonstrate policy and resources, gather additional data around their student needs, and ultimately comply with both Title IX and Clery legislation. And as you'll note also, we have courses that are reflective of refreshers for alcohol and also alcohol sanctions training. And really the concept behind this course bundle is that we will continue to iterate these courses and continue to add to the course bundle. So as institutions have other training needs, for example, diversity or otherwise, you will be able to seek and source those courses through the EverFi course bundle. This is just a reflection, just really quickly, of the faculty and staff courses, very much in line with what we're seeing in the student development courses, recognizing that those on the phone may also have some responsibility around faculty and staff. We just wanted to quickly show this to you. In terms of critical functionality, this is a really super interesting conversation for me. As 6 years ago, we weren't having conversations with institutions around the critical functionality of our technology. It was really viewed upon as a programmatic experience. And so the conversations really revolved around the content that it contained and the prevention best practice and how we incorporated behavioral change theories in our courses. But now, as institutions have grown themselves in their sophistication of technology, we have also had to answer that call as an organization. So when we think about critical functionality, certainly accessibility is one of those issues that we're addressing and investing a good deal of resources in to ensure that our courses meet the highest standards possible with regards to accessibility and disability features. We also recognize that we need to continue to improve the deployment of the delivery methods by which we communicate to students in order to get you from that position of crawling to walking to ensure that the content is being presented to your student population. And 3 years ago, we never had a conversation around capturing electronic policy, and this is a non-starter now, that your courses have to have an opportunity for the learner to acknowledge receipt of policy, and that the learning management system in which the courses are being deployed have to be able to capture that. And then the third and fourth piece of this critical functionality is also sort of a growing and interesting conversation that as offices of IT on campuses are becoming more critical to strategic priorities and to reduce risk in a number of different ways, we're being charged as a SaaS-based company to be able to provide support around how we do our business and how we're committing to protecting the data that we're collecting on behalf of institutions. And we certainly take that seriously at EverFi. And you'll note there that we partner with Amazon Web Services and are frequently conducting internal and external audits to ensure that our LMS and our course content are safe and secure. And then the last piece of this is really being able to ensure that your training records are stored indefinitely and available in real time. This is particularly important in the event that an institution is charged with an internal or external audit to be able to provide proof of delivery and proof of receipt of policy. And then the last couple of pieces that I'll talk to you before I hand this over to Lisa is really around data integration and automation. And this is, again, where we get to a position where institutions are really going from a crawl phase to a walk phase and thinking about how we ultimately can integrate with existing business process within the institution, and whether that is an LMS integration with Canvas or Blackboard or otherwise. Then we also think about how we can actually do some registration automation integration. Can you define a first-year student and automatically deliver them alcohol prevention, sexual assault and relationship violence prevention, and otherwise as you've deemed appropriate for the institution, and then ultimately provide them training on an annual ongoing basis? And then how can our systems actually have conversations so that ultimately from an administrative perspective, one or more than one individual is not obligated to ensure the lifting of holds, for example, if you as an institution are considering mandate and holding second semester registration as part of that. And then the last piece of this is really from a user experience, and how can we create a better user experience in providing a single sign-on perspective to authenticate the user through an existing process on campus, where we're seeing a really interesting shift over the course of the past 2.5 years, and Lisa can speak a little bit more to this, of institutions using single sign-on as their primary choice versus having institutions require learners to create separate usernames and passwords. Happy to dig into a lot of those other details on an individual basis, but these are some of the things that we're really seeing in the marketplace that are shifting the type of conversations that we're having.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And before we pass it over to Lisa, for those of you who are scratching your head saying, Jennifer just spent the last 6 minutes talking about single sign-on and data integration, and we thought this webinar was about deploying more effective prevention programs in 2017. And it's a great segue, or it's an important segue into Lisa, because so much of her world is thinking about assessment and thinking about data. And so while we don't want to degrade or in any way cheapen the significance of the work that we're doing, and Rob Bulow and Holly Ryder-Milkovich and others are from a training and development perspective, but we'd be remiss not to say that the landscape has changed, because the data output that comes from this becomes the mechanism through which we think about future programming, and by we I mean as campus representatives, as we're thinking about what's next. How did we do this year? How can we do better next year? And to really accomplish that, data becomes central. And in order to get the data has to be coming in. And that's just a big part of how we're working with campuses now. So I thought I'd bring it up because I'm listening to Jennifer nodding my head, but saying, I wonder how this is being received, because I know for many of you, this may be a shift in thinking. And with that, I'll pass it to Lisa.
Thanks, Preston. That was a really great introduction to sort of what I wanted to talk about here. And Jennifer, you can go ahead and move forward to the next slide. And so, when we think about, our platform and how we're working with schools, the course content is absolutely critical to what we're doing, but how we're collecting data and how we're presenting that data back to institutions really goes hand in hand, and helping schools understand the kinds of data that they now have available to them to help inform future customizations to their courses, what courses to deploy, what timing to deploy with which populations, and really being able to have some new insights into your students that you may not have another opportunity to collect. So with all of our courses, we have both surveys and assessments. And so assessments are really meant to understand how much are students learning from taking our courses. Do they leave our courses knowing more, having a better understanding of these core concepts than they came in with? And some of our courses have passing scores. Some of them are just trying to assess on a general level, what did they learn, and reporting that back to you in real time, all within our platform. But on top of that, all of our courses also have very extensive attitudinal and behavioral surveys to really get a snapshot of how your students are processing through these core concepts to help identify some areas of strength and areas of improvement for you all on campus. So you can see some snapshots here of some of our data delivery, giving you demographic information, different kinds of student experiences separated by gender. We have several other opportunities within our platform to dive a little bit deeper into the data. So, for example, we have schools who will use our raw data to do some very in-depth analysis on drinking behavior for different ethnic populations, and have found some really interesting research around their students of color being, by and large, significantly healthier on campus than their majority students. And so if they understand that there's this really healthy population, how do they engage students both from an alcohol perspective to continue their healthy behavior, but it's also something that cross-sections with other areas on campus that are working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and they can really focus in on these students of color who they know are coming in significantly healthier with fewer high-risk drinking rates. Similarly, we'll see, schools looking at data from their sexual assault surveys who are understanding that even after going through training, it's unclear to students where they need to report on campus. So they have that information before classes even start, makes it very easy for them to nimbly create more programming opportunities, more training, more social awareness campaigns during orientation in the first few weeks of campus to reinforce certain aspects that are critical to university processes that students are still lacking a little bit after orientation or coming in, they're having taken their trainings over the course of the summer. And so part of our job as customer success managers is to really help you dive into this data, understand what's going on really well, identifying, how to increase your usage of the course so that we're expanding the amount of data that we can collect, and really tweaking in real time all of the other efforts that you're doing on campus based on your population level online programming. And Jennifer, if you want to move to the next slide. So the majority of our courses are really focused, and as Jennifer mentioned, we do also have ongoing student trainings for sexual assault and alcohol prevention. And then what ties in really nicely with the combination of those things is a climate survey. And climate surveys have been more and more enforced by both legislation and best practices over the past several years, including in 2015, the Department of Education Title IX Resource Guide, very strongly advocating for climate surveys, as well as the White House recommendations that Jennifer mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And we've been implementing climate surveys with our partners for the past several years, and you can see on the left here some of the insights that we've collected from a group of about 80 schools that participated in the climate survey. And a climate survey versus some of our core surveys are really designed to have a snapshot of the entire student population. So rather than just focusing in on your incoming students or just your returning students, you can get a cross-section of all of your students' attitudinal and behavioral opinions of these different areas that you're trying to really put some quantifiable numbers behind, so that you can not just do really population level tailored programming, but understand it as an environmental impact, where this data is coming from and what areas really need to hone in and focus in on. And then the other benefit of tying a climate survey with core survey data is you then have a measure of comparison. So you can see, well, okay, we can see how our incoming students are, we can see what our returning students are, and then here are those two data pieces compared to what we know of a cross-section of the entire university. It also allows you to have a second touch point with your upperclassmen students to make sure that they have an opportunity to voice any concerns. They've been acclimated to the campus culture and sort of can easily point out where there might be deficiencies in your current processes so that you can really target those a little bit more in depth. And we do have a climate survey platform. Jen, if you want to switch over to the next slide here. That allows you to create your own survey. We have the White House Task Force survey that's preloaded in here that is available to use. We have an EverFi version as well that's based off of the White House Task Force recommendations and has sort of been expanded upon with our subject matter experts and thought leaders. And it allows you to deploy straight within our platform, track and report from a data perspective, completely anonymous. We have some best practices to help you go through the IRB as well. And this allows you to have all of your data in a centralized place that makes it, again, very easy to compare against other EverFi data that's collected through our courses. So to move on a little bit, Jen, if you want to switch over, so to talk about, sort of who we are standing behind, these platforms, these courses, and certainly all of our customers, we have a very, very large infrastructure behind us, about 100 members wide. And just to start off a little bit with my team, so yeah, Jen, you can move forward to the next slide here. So we really support our customers from two different perspectives. So one is our institutional customers, the people who are managing our courses and our platform on the day-to-day. So all of our EverFi customers have a dedicated customer success manager who runs all of our onboarding, makes sure that you're deploying, tracks a customized implementation and training plan for what courses you want to deploy over the course of the year, and make sure that we're getting everything set up and on track along those lines, as well as any technical integrations that Jennifer mentioned that you'd like to set up as well. We're available for questions, trainings, during normal business hours, and we do an annual review of training goals, usage, and certainly that survey data to make sure that you're maximizing everything that you can glean from that perspective. But then on top of that, we do also offer 24/7 end user support for your students and learners who are going through our courses. Our courses we really pride ourselves on them being engaging and interactive and certainly easy to use and intuitive, but we do know that sometimes students have technical issues or want to sort of reach out and ask for help. So we do pair up with Blackboard for 24/7 end user support for troubleshooting technical issues so that you don't have to take that on, and we're minimizing the amount of calls that come into your offices. And then also we have a self-help portal that students can engage with for, live chat, resources, sort of additional information, pointing them back to the customized resources that you have within the course as well. So making sure that they're getting all the information that they need. Jen, you want to move forward a little bit? Great. And so beyond just the customer success team, we have a whole team, like I mentioned, of about 100 people sitting behind our higher ed business, making sure that we're developing the best courses, having the best platform, certainly in line with best practices from a prevention and compliance perspective, and really making sure that we're supporting you in the best way possible. And so just to go into that a little bit deeper and talk about our prevention team in particular, if you want to move forward. So our prevention education team is headed up by Rob Bulow, who's an MPH from Harvard School of Public Health, as well as several other MPHs on our team. Holly Ryder-Milkovich, not on this slide just yet, but she's our newest team member who headed up violence prevention efforts at University of Michigan and was involved in the White House Task Force recommendations around sexual violence prevention. And these are the people that are really fueling our campus prevention network and all of the research and efficacy data that you're seeing from our summit and our Facebook page, as Preston mentioned earlier. And so our team pairs up with subject matter experts in the field, working with campus prevention experts, working with student focus groups to really make sure that how we're framing all of the content in our course is in line with evidence-based best practice to ensure that it's not just providing students with critical education, but it's actually making demonstrated impact on your students' attitudes, behaviors, and knowledge as well. And then on top of that, Jen, if you want to move forward, thanks. We also have a team of 10 in-house lawyers that are committed to tracking legislative changes. So as I'm sure you all know, laws are changing very quickly, and states are moving from, we have states like New York and Connecticut and California who have very specific legislation on how, the training needs to be worded and certain aspects of it that might differ from national legislation. And so making sure that we have a dedicated team that's following legislative changes, making recommendations to our content team to ensure that the way that those requirements are presented in the course when we need different information for different states, so that it's not something that you all have to make sure that you're keeping on top of, but we do have a whole content team that's really dedicated to ensuring that that's happening for you.
Thanks, Lisa. We're about 5 minutes from stop time, so I want to thank everyone for hanging with us through this. I hope that this was informative. Want to just spend a few minutes now to close talking about how we can help you and what's realistic in 2017. So I think first things first, just want to make the comment that there's lots of different ways that we hope to support you, but understand that that's what we're here to do, and that's the mission of EverFi is to help you find ways to do this more effectively, whether it's with us or alongside of us or out in front of us. Any way that we can support you, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to do that. And if this is your first time engaging with us, the first time you've seen some of what we do, just want to emphasize that campuspreventionnetwork.com is a tremendous resource that is completely open, and you're welcome to download white papers and watch webinar recordings from other experts. We will be posting 20 plus sessions that were full sessions filmed and recorded at the CPN Summit in Boston earlier this week, as we've mentioned. I just can't express enough how valuable that those resources will be to you as you're thinking about how to solve these problems. And then, of course, if Jennifer, you can jump to the next slide. Certainly want to think through how we can also work with you to help expand the mission from a technology perspective, from a course perspective. We know that some of you invariably are saying, not in a million years would we use a vendor for this, or not in a million years would we do online. We're still doing in person. We're used to working with organizations in any way that we can, in any way that's complementary to your goals and to your campus and to your sort of philosophy on how you approach prevention and ultimately compliance education. But just want to sort of put it out there that that's what we're here to do. We're here to help with this mission expansion. And so with that, I would say that, for those of you who don't have anything online or are doing it themselves, I'm not sure we can help you run in 2017. We can certainly give you recommendations on how you might run with the initial programs you have, but it's not too late to crawl with us. So if you are looking to expand your offering, or you're considering EverFi from a content perspective, certainly there is still time ahead of fall 2017. So what I'd ask is that you reach out to Jennifer, you reach out to Lisa. You can indicate in the comment or chat box. You can type in demo or type in Jennifer, or type in whatever you want that might indicate to us that you'd like to continue the conversation. We can walk you through what the content looks like. We can discuss next steps and put a timeline in place. And again, though, don't want this to be an all or nothing. There's the Facebook page, the community that we're building around CPN is a tremendous resource, and we encourage you to actively participate in those conversations that are led by your peers. We'll be launching the advisory council that has 20 plus senior leaders from campuses who are working together to help and educate their peers on how to develop programs both offline and online. And so with that, I think maybe we can just jump to the last slide. I'd be remiss not to just mention that as we think about expanding the mission, that as a business, to the extent that we can help you from a content and technology perspective, this is a very much, we've modeled our pricing structure to match our philosophy, which means that it's unlimited access, it's flat fee. And so as we're working with you strategically to help think about how to reach different populations year over year, whether it's with our new diversity course that's coming out or our new prescription drug and opioid course that's coming out, that's always something that is available to you, and both primary courses and ongoing courses. There's no additional cost once you're a partner with EverFi. And so we've certainly, we live and breathe the mission of the organization, and certainly that's reflective in how we structure our relationships with the universities as well. So with that, and we're right at the top of the hour. Again, my name is Preston Clark. Thank you to Jennifer Davidson and Lisa Hobenstock for jumping on. We're all in different cities and states today, and so I'm glad we were able to pull this off. Many of you asked for the expanding the mission slide. Copies of that will go out along with the rest of the deck and with the recording tomorrow. If you have specific questions, please don't be shy. My email is preston@everfi.com. You can type in the questions into the question box. We will be responsive. And certainly if you'd like to be included in webinars and newsletters and articles and whatnot in the future, please indicate that in the chat box as well. So with that, thanks to everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next webinar.